Hello and welcome. This video will go over all aspects of how to debate the disability vouchers affirmative. First, we'll go over some of the basic concepts introduced in this affirmative. Next, we'll walk through the building blocks, starting with inherency and solvency, and then going to the poverty advantage and the human rights advantage. Lastly, we'll talk about how to use this evidence and this affirmative case to win some debates. First, what is a voucher? In the United States, school funding is largely allocated by student. In other words, schools get money based on how many students they enroll. A school voucher is a free market idea that would give money to the family of the school, not to the school. They would then be able to shop around between traditional public schools, private schools, charter schools, or any other sort of school for the best education that fits their child's needs. So what is a disability? Disability is a broad catch-all term for encompassing impairments, activity limitations, and participation restrictions. Disability is not just a medical diagnosis, but a complex challenge between a person and the society that they live in. In practice, this covers a large array of diagnoses, including cerebral palsy, ADHD, autism, Asperger's, and dyslexia, as well as developmental aphasia and being blind or deaf. This phenomena create a barrier between the students and their performance in school. Many get some form of accommodation, such as extra time to take tests, while others with more severe disabilities work with their schools to develop an individualized education plan, or IEP, that will help them learn. When speaking about disability, it's important to be respectful and careful with the language we use. As a reminder, affirmative cases have several important parts: the inherency, or why the problem exists now; the plan, which is what the government should do about it; the solvency, which will explain how the plan works; and the advantages, why we should do the plan. First, let's jump into the inherency. This affirmative argues that students with disabilities are not being served well by existing public school programs. The evidence specifically argues that a one-size-fits-all approach, as prescribed by Congress, is the wrong approach to take with a population with diverse needs. Success in this case is defined by graduation rates, post-graduation opportunities, and juvenile detention rates for students with disabilities. Next, the solvency. The affirmative identifies a state program, the McKay Scholarship Program out of Florida, that should be used as a model for the affirmative. The evidence cites several factors why the McKay Scholarship Program makes a good model: its popularity with students and parents, its growth, that more people are using the program, and that it pays enough money to make choices actually available to students who are participating. The affirmative is arguing that these vouchers are a good idea, at least for students with disabilities. They also argue that there is a competitive effect of voucher programs improving public schools as well. In other words, the introduction of competition through vouchers will encourage public schools to improve themselves, helping students who choose to stay there, as well as those who choose to use vouchers to move to private institutions. Next, let's jump into the poverty advantage, the first reason why we should do the plan. The uniqueness is simple: that students with disabilities disproportionately end up in poverty. The link argues that a good education can help students with disabilities avoid poverty later in life. The impact is that poverty destroys the quality of life from those who suffer from it, and failing to act normalizes this societal failing. As with any impact, it's important to remember our impact calculus: time frame, magnitude, and probability. The second advantage discusses human rights. The uniqueness is that students with disabilities are not getting a proper education now. This argument is made earlier in the affirmative multiple times and is not explicitly made during this advantage. The link is that getting a proper education is a human right. The human right is a basic minimum that society has agreed that should be available for all people just for being alive. the impact is that human rights are a moral responsibility that guaranteed a minimum quality of life. Let's talk a little bit about the idea of framework. Both advantages of this affirmative offer an alternative framework for how we should evaluate the round, using moral claims. Advantage 1 says that the structural violence of poverty is a failing that we have a moral obligation to fix. That's the Edwards evidence. And Advantage 2 says that we have a moral obligation to meet basic human rights. These two frameworks work together, arguing that we have a moral responsibility to provide education and thus a decent opportunity to avoid poverty for every person. Framework is an argument about what values we use to evaluate a debate. If you win your framework that we should consider moral reasons for action, this value system being the right one for the judge to use, then you will win the debate. So let's talk about how to debate this affirmative. First, in the 1AC, it's important to read the case before you actually get to the tournament to make sure you can get through it all. If you can't, remove an advantage or highlight the evidence down, preserving the key points of course, to make sure you can get to all the parts of the affirmative you need during the speech. Being able to explain what a school voucher is and what the McKay Scholarship Program does to help students with disabilities are key. The 2AC, it's important to always start with an overview, a two-sentence narrative that tells the story of the affirmative. The U.S. education system is failing students with disabilities now. Creating a school voucher program based on the McKay Scholarship Program will help students with disabilities avoid poverty and guarantee their basic human rights. It's just one example of the narrative you could tell. Next, it's important to answer the 1NC. Extend the broad thesis of each piece of your affirmative case, referencing evidence and answering any arguments the 1NC might have made. Read more evidence only if you have to, or if you're adding more offense. Remember to hit all parts of the affirmative case, your inherency, your solvency, and your advantages. Extend your framework and do some impact calculus, including time frame, probability, and magnitude. If you have some time, consider reading a 2AC add-on for more offense. In the 1AR, you're pressed for time. So remember to still tell the story of your affirmative with a quick two-sentence overview. The negative just spoke for 13 minutes, so it's important to remind the judge what your case is all about. Next, answer any inherency or solvency arguments made in the block. You need to prove that your affirmative is still needed and will work. Choose the advantage you think you are winning the most. Answer all of the arguments your opponent has made against it. Be sure to do some impact calculus here as well. Kick the other advantages you're not using later. Kicking an argument means answering all offensive arguments the other team has made against you, such as a link or impact turn. This means they can't use it against you later. Kicking this advantage will save you time so you can properly argue the rest of your case. The 2AR is important to sell your case to the judge. Tell the story of your affirmative. Focus on the advantage you are still going for after the 1AR. Answer any 2NR arguments about inherency and solvency, and then answer 2NR arguments against your remaining advantage. Do impact calculus. Why is the affirmative more important than not doing anything? And why is it worth doing even if there are negative outcomes? For this affirmative, this means focusing on your framework of human rights and structural violence. In the JV division, the plain text of the affirmative must remain the same and predictable for the negative. This means you'll still have to argue that the United States should create a national school voucher program based on the McKay Scholarship Program from Florida. However, you can do new research to improve your arguments and add new scenarios. Your solvency arguments can make your affirmative more specific and avoid or answer common negative arguments. New advantages can take the case in a direction that interests you. Building on the 2AC stigma advantage could be a powerful way to add more offense to the affirmative. Lastly, new 2AC evidence can help you answer common negative responses.